This was the chaotic scene as a man rushed past the security checkpoint at the White House Correspondents' dinner last night, with shots fired before he was tackled to the ground by the Secret Service.
At approximately 8:36 tonight, an individual charged a U.S. Secret Service checkpoint here in the lobby area of the hotel. He was armed with a shotgun, a handgun, and multiple knives.
The suspect, identified by law enforcement sources as 31-year-old Cole Allen of Torrance, California, expected to be charged with using a firearm during a crime of violence and assault on a federal officer using a dangerous weapon.
At this point, it does appear he is a lone actor, a lone gunman. There does not appear to be any sort of danger to the public at this time. However, we are continuing to investigate this matter.
At 8:40 on a Saturday evening, inside one of the most iconic hotels in Washington, D.C., over 1,000 people sat shoulder to shoulder in a glittering ballroom. Journalists, politicians, celebrities, cabinet members, and at the center of it all, the President of the United States. Champagne glasses clinked. Laughter echoed off chandeliers. It was supposed to be a night of tradition, a celebration, a party. But just beyond the ballroom doors, a man dressed head to toe in black was descending a stairwell from the 10th floor. In a bag slung across his body, he carried a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun fitted with a sling and shell holder, a .38 caliber semi-automatic pistol, multiple knives, including a large fixed blade, and in his mind, a plan he had been building for weeks. His name was Cole Tomas Allen. He was 31 years old, a mechanical engineer, a computer scientist, a former teacher of the month at a tutoring center in suburban Los Angeles, a man so quiet that a former professor would later describe him as soft-spoken, a man who sat in the front row of every class, came to office hours, sent polite emails about coursework. And on this night, April 25, 2026, he had traveled nearly 3,000 miles by train, checked into the very hotel where the president would be dining, and was now seconds away from charging through a Secret Service checkpoint with enough firepower to turn a black-tie gala into a massacre. What happened next unfolded in a matter of seconds, a blur of gunfire, screaming, and chaos that would be heard around the world. A Secret Service officer took a shotgun blast to the chest. The president was rushed from the stage. CNN anchor Wolf Blitzer, standing just feet away, watched as the gunman fired what he described as a very serious weapon at least 6 times before being tackled to the ground. But here's the thing that makes this story so chilling. This wasn't a spontaneous act. This wasn't a man who snapped. Cole Allen didn't wake up that morning and decide to do this. He booked his hotel room nearly 3 weeks in advance. He chose to travel by train Los Angeles to Chicago, Chicago to Washington, a journey that took days. He wrote a manifesto. He sent a goodbye note to his family 10 minutes before the attack, telling them he believed it was his duty. And yet somehow, nobody saw it coming. So the question isn't just how did this happen? The question is, who was Cole Tomas Allen? What turned a quiet, bright, well-educated young man from a California suburb into someone who would cross the country with a bag full of weapons and a plan to kill the most powerful man on the planet? And how did he get so close? This is that story. To understand how Cole Tomas Allen ended up face down on the floor of the Washington Hilton with his hands cuffed behind his back, you have to go back to the suburbs, back to the classrooms, back to a life that, by every outward measure, looked like it was heading somewhere good. Allen grew up in the South Bay of Los Angeles, in and around the city of Torrance, a quiet, sprawling suburb of about 140,000 people, roughly 15 miles southwest of downtown LA. It's the kind of place where the streets are clean, the neighborhoods are orderly, and ambition usually looks like getting into a good college and landing a stable career. And by that standard, Cole Allen was doing everything right. He enrolled at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, one of the most prestigious science and engineering schools in the world. The kind of place that doesn't just accept smart kids, it accepts exceptional ones. And Allen didn't just attend, he competed. In 2016, he was part of a 5-person team called Blitzkrieg Bots that won the 31st annual mechanical engineering design competition, building robots that could play soccer. His team took home the trophy. His name made the school records. A year later, in 2017, he graduated with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. But he wasn't done. Around the same time, a local news crew from ABC7 showed up to feature him in a story. He had developed a prototype emergency brake system for wheelchairs.
Wheelchair brakes tend to lock the wheels, but don't actually lock the chair to the ground. The idea with this is to prevent
A device designed to lock the chair to the ground itself, not just the wheels, preventing dangerous skids on slopes. He stood in front of the camera, calm and articulate, explaining how his invention worked. He looked like exactly the kind of young engineer you'd want building the future. After Caltech, Allen's life took a quieter turn. He moved between a few addresses in the LA area, spending time in San Gabriel between 2018 and 2019, then returning to Torrance. He eventually went back to school, pursuing a master's degree in computer science at California State University, Dominguez Hills, which he completed in 2025. Along the way, he picked up work as a tutor at C2 Education, a national test prep and tutoring company focused on college-bound students. He was good at it. Good enough that in December 2024, the Torrance branch named him Teacher of the Month. He also dabbled in independent video game development, a solitary, creative pursuit that fit the profile of a man who seemed to prefer building things in quiet rooms. His LinkedIn profile read like a resume written by someone still searching: mechanical engineer and computer scientist by degree, independent game developer by experience, teacher by birth. It was earnest, a little idealistic, even. The kind of bio that makes you think this is a person still trying to figure out where they fit. And that's what makes what came next so deeply unsettling. Because somewhere between the robotics competitions and the tutoring sessions, between the wheelchair breaks and the video games, something inside Cole Allen shifted. The man who sat in the front row of every lecture, who sent polite emails to his professors, who was described by one of them as soft-spoken, that man began to change. Quietly, invisibly, in ways that no one around him seemed to notice until it was far, far too late. He started buying guns. The first, a semi-automatic pistol purchased in 2023, then a shotgun bought in August 2025, both purchased legally in California, both unremarkable transactions on paper, but in hindsight they were the first visible steps on a path that would end at the Washington Hilton. He also started writing, not lesson plans, not code, a manifesto, a document that would later be recovered by investigators, one that didn't name Donald Trump directly but laid out a series of grievances against the federal government. Among them, the government's strikes on what the manifesto claimed were drug boats in the Pacific in early 2026. The writing was described by officials as clear in its intent. This wasn't a diary entry, it was a declaration. And then on April 6, 2026, nearly 3 weeks before the White House Correspondents' dinner, Cole Allen opened a browser, navigated to the Washington Hilton's booking page, and reserved a room for 3 nights, April 24th through the 26th. He wasn't booking a vacation, he was setting a date. The quiet man from Torrance had made his decision, and the clock had started ticking. There are faster ways to get from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. A direct flight takes about 5 hours. But Cole Allen didn't fly. He took a train. And if you think about that for a moment, really sit with it, it tells you something important about the kind of person investigators were dealing with. A man in a hurry flies. A man who wants to avoid detection, who wants to move through the country without his bags being scanned, without his name popping up on a TSA manifest, without anyone looking too closely at what he was carrying. That man takes the train. And Allen had a lot to carry. He left his home near Los Angeles sometime around April 21st, boarding an Amtrak train bound for Chicago. The journey itself is long, roughly 43 hours through the desert, over the Rockies, across the Great Plains. Hour after hour of flat land and small towns scrolling past the window. We don't know what he did during those hours, whether he slept, whether he stared out at the country he was about to try to change forever, whether he opened his laptop and reread the words he had written, the manifesto, the grievances, the justification he had built for himself, brick by brick, until the wall was high enough to hide behind. What we do know is that packed somewhere in his belongings were a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, a .38 caliber semi-automatic pistol, and several knives, including a large fixed blade, all purchased legally in California, all now being transported across state lines with the intent to commit a felony, a federal crime in its own right, even if he had never fired a single shot. He arrived in Chicago and transferred to a second train, this one headed east to Washington, D.C., another long stretch of hours, another 1,000 miles of track. He pulled into Union Station at approximately 1:00 p.m. on April 24th, a Friday. The dinner was the following evening. He didn't rush, he didn't panic. He took a cab or walked to the Washington Hilton, the very hotel where in just over 30 hours the President of the United States would sit down for dinner with 1,000 guests. And he checked in, room on the 10th floor, reservation already confirmed, 3 nights, his name on the booking, his credit card on file, as if he were a businessman on a work trip, as if nothing were wrong at all. And here's where the story becomes a study in two realities existing in the same building at the same time. On one level, the Washington Hilton was preparing for the biggest night on its calendar. The White House Correspondents Association dinner is one of the most high-profile events in American political life, a tradition that dates back over a century. The ballroom was being set. The red carpet was being rolled out. Secret Service teams were sweeping the venue, establishing a security perimeter around the event space, positioning officers at checkpoints, setting up magnetometers at the entrances to the ballroom. Hundreds of journalists, politicians, and celebrities were confirming their attendance, pressing their tuxedos, planning their entrances. But the Washington Hilton wasn't a fortress. It was a functioning hotel. Guests were checking in and out. Tourists were rolling suitcases through the lobby. The hallways, the elevators, the stairwells, all of it remained open to anyone with a room key. The Secret Service secured the dinner. They could not secure the entire hotel. And Cole Allen knew it. He spent Friday night in his room. We don't know what he did, whether he slept, whether he assembled his weapons, whether he rehearsed the route from the 10th floor to the terrace level where the security checkpoint guarded the entrance to the ballroom. But investigators would later piece together, through hotel surveillance footage, exactly what he did the following evening. On Saturday, April 25th, the night of the dinner, cameras captured Allen leaving his 10th floor room dressed entirely in black. He carried a black bag containing his weapons, the shotgun, the pistol, the knives. He did not take the elevator. He entered an interior stairwell, descending floor by floor, deliberately bypassing the heavily monitored corridors and public areas of the hotel. He was methodical. He had clearly studied the layout. He exited the stairwell on the same level as the foyer leading to the dinner's red carpet and the main security checkpoint, the last barrier between the public areas of the hotel and the ballroom, where the president sat with the First Lady, cabinet members, senior officials, and over 1,000 guests. This was the moment, the point of no return. At approximately 8:40 p.m., while dinner was being served inside the ballroom, Cole Allen approached the magnetometer checkpoint on the terrace level. He didn't slow down. He didn't hesitate. He broke into a sprint fast, according to those who reviewed the footage, and charged straight through the metal detector, holding the shotgun. The Secret Service officers stationed at the checkpoint had seconds to react. And what happened in those seconds would determine whether this became the deadliest attack on a sitting president in modern American history, or the one that was stopped just in time. A gunshot rang out, then another, then another. The exchange of fire was rapid, chaotic, deafening in the enclosed space of the hotel corridor. One of the shots, believed to have been fired by Allen, struck a Secret Service officer squarely in the chest. The round hit his ballistic vest. He staggered but stayed on his feet. He was alive. The vest had done its job. The officer drew his service weapon and returned fire, hitting Allen not with a bullet but driving him to the ground. Allen fell. He was not struck by gunfire but suffered a knee injury as he went down. Officers swarmed. He was tackled, pinned, cuffed. It was over. Inside the ballroom, the sound of gunfire carried through the walls. Secret Service agents shouted, "Shots fired." The room erupted. Agents rushed to the president, pulling him and the First Lady from their seats, shielding them, moving them toward a secure exit. Guests dove under tables. Some screamed. Some froze. The orderly world of white tablecloths and evening gowns collapsed into primal fear in the span of a heartbeat. CNN anchor Wolf Blitzer had been standing just outside the ballroom doors when it happened. He would later tell viewers he was only a few feet away from the gunman, close enough to see the weapon, close enough to count the shots. He described Allen firing what appeared to be a very serious weapon at least 6 times before being brought down. Officers rushed Blitzer to safety, pushing him into a nearby restroom and locking the door. Within minutes, the president was evacuated. The ballroom was cleared. The suspect lay face down on the floor, shirtless, hands bound behind his back. Donald Trump would later post photographs of Allen in that position on Truth Social, images that would flash across every screen in the country before the night was over. The whole thing, from the moment Allen charged the checkpoint to the moment he was on the ground in handcuffs, lasted a matter of seconds. Not minutes, seconds. 3,000 miles of train track, 3 weeks of planning, a manifesto, a goodbye letter, a bag full of weapons, and it all came down to a handful of seconds and a ballistic vest that held. But the questions were only beginning. The gunfire had barely stopped echoing through the corridors of the Washington Hilton before the machinery of consequence began to turn, and it turned fast. Within the hour, FBI agents were already on a plane to California. By late Saturday night, a team of federal agents descended on a quiet residential street in Torrance, the neighborhood where Cole Allen had lived for most of his adult life. Neighbors who had gone to bed to a normal Saturday evening woke to the glow of floodlights and the crackle of police radios. FBI agents in tactical gear executed a search warrant on a home associated with Allen, methodically removing boxes, devices, and evidence from the residence, while local police held the perimeter. Reporters arrived shortly after. Camera crews lined the sidewalk. Neighbors stood in their doorways in bathrobes, watching the scene unfold with the dazed, hollow expressions of people realizing they had been living next door to something they never imagined. 3 time zones away, in a secure location somewhere in Washington, Cole Allen sat in federal custody. He had been taken to a hospital for evaluation, not for a gunshot wound, but for a knee injury sustained when he was tackled to the ground. He hadn't been hit by a single bullet. The Secret Service had fired at him multiple times, and somehow he walked away without a scratch from gunfire. The officer he shot wasn't as lucky. Though the ballistic vest saved his life, the impact of a shotgun round to the chest is not something you simply shake off. He was expected to recover, but the bruising alone would be a reminder he'd carry for weeks. By Sunday morning, the political shockwaves were already rippling outward. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche appeared on Meet the Press and laid out the suspect's movements: the train from Los Angeles to Chicago, the transfer to Washington, the hotel check-in. He made clear that investigators believed this was a premeditated assassination attempt, not a random act of violence. The word assassin was used deliberately and repeatedly. This was not a security incident. This was not a breach. In the eyes of the federal government, this was a man who crossed the country to kill the president. By Monday, Allen was arraigned in federal court in Washington, D.C. He walked into the courtroom in a blue jumpsuit, soft-spoken even now, scanning the gallery. Over 40 members of the press and public packed into the rows behind him. Magistrate Judge Matthew Sharbo explained the proceedings. Allen nodded. He didn't speak much. The man who had charged a security checkpoint with a shotgun 2 nights earlier now looked, by all accounts, small. The charges were severe. 3 federal counts: attempting to assassinate the President of the United States, transporting a firearm and ammunition across state lines with intent to commit a felony, discharging a firearm during a crime of violence. U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., Gene Ampiro, of the same Gene Ampiro who had stood before cameras on Saturday night promising swift justice, made clear that this was only the beginning. "We have a solid case," Pirro said during a subsequent appearance on Fox News. She pointed to the layers of evidence already in hand: the manifesto, the advance hotel booking, the cross-country travel, the weapons transported across state lines, the farewell note sent to his family minutes before the attack. "It's very clear what his intent was," she said. "It was to kill the president." She emphasized that prosecutors intended to pursue the case to the fullest extent of the law. Life in prison was on the table, and she made a point that would hang over the investigation like a shadow in the weeks to come. They were still digging into his devices, into his search history, into his communications, into every digital footprint he had left behind over months and years. "We will be able to track everything he did," she said. "We're just getting started." The DOJ released photographs of the weapons recovered at the scene: the shotgun with its sling and shell holder, the .38 caliber pistol, the knives laid out on a surface like evidence in a museum exhibit of intent. Each item a piece of a puzzle that investigators were only beginning to assemble. But if the prosecution's case was taking shape, so was the political firestorm. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called the incident a very clear failure of systems. She didn't mince words. How, she asked, was a man able to check into the same hotel as the president, move through the building undetected with a bag full of weapons, navigate the interior stairwells to avoid security, and reach the final checkpoint before anyone stopped him? How did such a catastrophic failure to secure the perimeter occur? She demanded. It was a fair question, and it exposed an uncomfortable truth at the heart of the story. The Secret Service had done its job at the checkpoint. The officers at the magnetometer reacted in seconds, engaged the suspect, took a round to the chest, returned fire, and brought him down before he reached the ballroom. That part of the plan worked. But everything before that moment, the fact that Allen was a guest in the hotel, that he moved freely through its hallways, that he descended 10 floors through an interior stairwell carrying a shotgun, and no one saw him, that part of the plan had a hole in it the size of a building. The Secret Service pushed back. Director Sean Curran pointed to the outcome. "It shows that our multi-layered protection works," he said. "The suspect never reached the president. The officers performed heroically. The system held." Interim D.C. Police Chief Jeffrey Carroll echoed the sentiment. The security plan was developed by the Secret Service, and that security plan did work this evening. But to many watching at home, it felt like a thin line to walk when a man with a shotgun had made it to within feet of a ballroom full of the most powerful people in the country. Reporters noted that the Washington Hilton was a functioning hotel with public spaces operating normally during the dinner. The Secret Service secured the event, not the building. And Allen had exploited that gap with surgical precision. The debate over a proposed new White House ballroom, a project that predated the shooting, was suddenly reignited. Supporters argued that moving events like the Correspondents' dinner to a purpose-built, fully secured facility on White House grounds would eliminate the vulnerability that Allen had exposed. Ocasio-Cortez pushed back, arguing the proposal was being opportunistically repackaged to justify spending at a time when Americans were struggling with rising costs, gutted health care, and housing insecurity. "I don't believe that we should be choosing our precious treasure to build an ornate castle on a scale which is quite unprecedented," she said. When asked if she felt safe as a member of Congress, her answer was blunt: "I never have." And beneath all the politics, beneath the legal proceedings and the security debates and the cable news cycles, there remained the question that no charge sheet or congressional hearing could fully answer. Why? The manifesto offered pieces: grievances against the federal government, anger over military strikes on alleged drug boats in the Pacific, a worldview that had curdled into something dark enough to justify violence. But manifestos are blueprints, not explanations. They tell you what a person believed. They don't tell you how they got there. Cole Allen's goodbye note to his family, sent 10 minutes before he charged the checkpoint, said he believed it was his duty. His duty, not his desire, not his rage, his duty. As if he had convinced himself that what he was about to do wasn't a choice at all, but an obligation. As if the soft-spoken tutor who built wheelchair brakes and soccer-playing robots had reasoned his way, step by logical step, into an act of extraordinary violence. And that is perhaps the most unsettling part of this entire story. Not that Cole Allen was a monster hiding in plain sight, but that he wasn't. He was a teacher, an engineer, a student who sat in the front row, a man who, by every account, was polite, quiet, and bright. The kind of person you'd hire to tutor your kid for the SATs, the kind of person you'd never look at twice. Until the night he walked out of room on the 10th floor of the Washington Hilton dressed in black, carrying a bag full of weapons, and tried to kill the President of the United States. This was the third apparent attempt on Donald Trump's life since 2024, following the shooting near Butler, Pennsylvania in July of that year, and a second incident at his golf club in West Palm Beach that September. It was also the second assassination attempt at the Washington Hilton itself, 45 years after John Hinckley Jr. shot Ronald Reagan outside the same building in 1981. History, it seems, has a terrible habit of returning to the same doorstep. Cole Tomas Allen now sits in federal custody, facing charges that could put him behind bars for the rest of his life. The investigation continues. More charges are expected. Prosecutors say they are mapping every corner of his digital life, every search, every message, every breadcrumb on the trail that led from a quiet apartment in Torrance to a hail of gunfire in the nation's capital. The ballroom has been cleaned, the red carpet rolled up, the hotel has reopened for business. Life in Washington moves on the way it always does, quickly, loudly, with one eye on the next crisis. But the questions Cole Allen left behind don't clean up so easily. How does a man like that become a man like this? How do you go from building things that help people to planning something designed to destroy? And in a country where the next Cole Allen might already be out there, booking a train ticket, writing his reasons, packing a bag, how do you see him coming before it's too late? Those are the questions that keep investigators up at night. And honestly, they should keep the rest of us up too.